let's go ahead and get into our, what we can finally do. This is officially the first ever pregame show of the Bear Necessities podcast, because, everything that happened last season where we had to kind of take a break from the podcast. This is the first ever pregame show on the Bear Necessities podcast, and we luckily get to do it against the Detroit Lions. Now, Detroit Lions, they obviously, they made a good amount of moves this previous season. They brought in Jamie Collins. They brought in Jeff Okudah in the draft, DeAndre Swift. They brought in plenty of guys, honestly. They also brought in, Julian Okwara. I already said DeAndre Swift, but Desmond Trufant, Jalen Kearse, and Danny Shelton. So brought in a good amount of talent, but they did lose their best defensive player that they have on their roster, Darius Slay, and they also ended up losing Snacks Harrison. So two, really big losses for them there. Two guys that had an issue with Matt Patricia, and at the end of the day, I'm looking at this as, for this year at least, I think Jeff Okudah has the potential to become better than Darius Slay, but for this year, I'm kind of looking at their talent as a wash.
Yeah, I think, from year to year, the Lions, they seem to kind of make a decent amount of moves, but they always end up in the same relative position. Sometimes they really show some promise and hit their stride, and it wasn't too long ago when they were actually up there with the Packers, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when Stafford was doing really well, and at the tail end of Megatron's career, they really kind of started making a good push for things, had a decent team, but ever since then it's kind of been the same dip back into pretty low mediocrity for them. But a team that their divisional opponent, they know what the Bears are going to bring to them, week in, week out. Luckily Mitchell Trubisky has been pretty good against them in the past. I'm really just kind of excited for the matchups. I think that, we talked about, the cornerbacks being a bit of a concern now. I'm curious to see how do these corners match up against, Detroit's wide receivers. It's still a position group that they're pretty good in, maybe not as good as back in the day when they had Calvin Johnson, but, Kenny Golladay, they have other weapons in there, and Stafford is someone that can get them the ball and get it to him, usually with a decent amount of accuracy, and it can be, very explosive too. They're a team that likes to throw the ball downfield. So it's going to be a bit of a test for the secondary in this week, and I'm excited to see how they react. And, ultimately the big question mark though is going to be the offense and see how they come out. Will Nagy run the ball? I feel like Bears fans have been screaming, pleading for Nagy to run the ball, and like you said, it's a Detroit defense that's kind of has some new faces to it. They're not the same that the Bears are used to facing, maybe a little bit weaker up front, so hopefully something that the Bears can take advantage of and really kind of impose their will on in the passing game and the running game.
Yeah, the Lions went 3-12-1 last year, but we have to remember that was with Matthew Stafford out for most of the season there. And then also they ended up they ended up having some other injuries along their defense as well, along their offense. But right now, the Lions' defense is certainly below average. It seems like Mitch lights them up every single game. They play a heavy man scheme, which Mitchell Trubisky tends to be really good at because it's not that hard to mentally comprehend. So that's part of the reason why we see Mitchell Trubisky absolutely light them up every single time he plays them. Their offensive line is all right, but they will be starting a rookie guard across from Akeem Hicks, so that should be pretty brutal for them there. And then the weaponry on offense, they do have their offense is pretty good when Matthew Stafford's in there, but their weaponry in general is just kind of okay. Hawkinson has been extremely underwhelming. May I even say looking like a bust so far at the position he was drafted. It was my opinion that they drafted the wrong Iowa tight end, but that was last year, and I think that so far that has held up to be true. They kind of used him in a really weird way where they just kind of let him take kind of in the way we use like Adam Shaheen, almost like not super efficient, not super effective, and really overall underwhelming. They do have Kenny Golladay, though, who is a good wide receiver, kind of similar to Allen Robinson. I think Allen Robinson's a little bit better, but still Kenny Golladay, good wide receiver. And, they were able to move the ball last year. So our defense, it's not going to be able to – I still think that our defense will really dominate them, but I think they're going to be a little bit more competent than we saw them last year. But ultimately, we'll also have to see if they develop any sort of rushing attack with DeAndre Swift and now Adrian Peterson. But do you have any do you have any predictions for the Detroit Lions as far as score goes? I know the Lions are actually favored in this game.
Yeah, to me, I see this one kind of playing out to be a bit of a grind. I think it's going to be week one. I think it's going to be sloppy. Neither team really having a chance to, of course, no team in the NFL having a chance to get things warming up in preseason. So I think we're going to see maybe some pretty shocking plays from here and there. I'm not saying it's going to be absolutely out of the category of what the NFL should look like, but I think we're probably going to see some mistakes, and I think that neither offense is really going to get going great. I think the Bears defense is going to hold Detroit in check pretty well. Like I said, not a team with a great running game. This allows Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn just to pin back and go after Matthew Stafford all day. I think Stafford will find his targets. I think he will find Galladay. I don't think that, Stafford will have an overly bad game, but I see this being a 20-14 win by the Bears. I think the Bears are going to be able to move the ball somewhat efficiently, get down into the red zone a decent amount. I still see them, plugging in a couple of field goals instead of touchdowns. I think it's going to be a game where they have the opportunity to go in and put in the end zone 4 or 5 times, but I don't see them doing that. So I think they get in the end zone a couple times, and I think the Bears, probably control the game, and maybe Detroit, sneaks back, tries to get a late push, gets a late touchdown, ends up 20-14. I think that the Bears do win their first game.
In the past 3 games that Mitch Trubisky has played against the Lions, he has put up 3 touchdowns in every single one of those games, and he's also only put up 1 interception. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give the Bears a little bit more respect than you might, Reese. And I'm going to go ahead and put them at 27 points. I think that, I do agree with you. I think that this game might look a little bit more dominant than the score actually displays, because I could see the Bears moving the ball pretty well, but still when they get into the red zone kind of stuttering like they have last year. And I would be shocked if the Lions put up more than 16 points on this Bears defense. I just, they are a good offense, but they're not better than the Rams, and they're not better than, a lot of other teams that we've played that has had way better offenses, and we've held them in better check than 16 points. So ultimately, I think it's probably going to end up being something about 27-16, an 11-point win. And I do see it being kind of dirty in the beginning. I think we'll see the Bears come out initially to a little bit of a fast start because they have a lot of scripted plays. I think it's going to be some good moving the ball. I think they might even score on their first possession, which I think would be actually, no, I think Matt Nagy did that in his very first game. So I think the Bears will score in their first possession, and then I think you might see a little bit of the sputtering that we started to see last year. And then after the half, I think the Bears are going to end up, the offense is going to take off a little bit and start performing even better, more smoothly. Especially with no preseason games, this could end up being a closer game than I'm predicting. But ultimately, I think it's probably going to end up being something like 27-16. I do think the Bears are going to win this game.
Yeah, I think the third quarter in this game, just because it's the first game of the year and the way things are going to play out, I think the third quarter is usually kind of the more irrelevant quarter. Sometimes there's just a lot of time wasting, time burning, running the football to get into the fourth quarter. I think that's going to be a really important third quarter. I think there's a chance that it heads into halftime pretty close. I don't think either team's really going to get out to a huge lead in this game. So it'll be a one possession, I think, heading into halftime, whether that be a field goal or a whole touchdown. And I think, each team's going to have a chance to retool and kind of, get in their own headspace and kind of, decide what game plan they want to take for the rest of the game. I think it's going to be big. I think, there probably is going to be some adjustments that Nagy needs to make in the second half. And I think it's a matter of, how big of adjustments he's willing to make as to, how good the Bears are going to do in the second half. I don't see the Bears, coming out firing that well on offense. I can't see them putting up 27 points. Just personally, I know that they have lit up Detroit in the past, but I don't know. I guess I still have a little bit of reservations as to how good this Bears offense can be. And I guess I really just want to see them, have a pretty balanced attack. And I'm sure, with the way Detroit is, I mean, there is the chance that the Bears could really light them up. But in my opinion, I think it's just going to be a little bit more of a closer fought strategic game come the the fourth quarter, and I think it'll end up pretty tight.
I just really have a hard time believing that this is going to be a tight game. Maybe I'm going to be wrong, and maybe the Detroit Lions really did change a lot this offseason, but it seems like, honestly, every single time the Bears even play Detroit, the record or the score looks closer than the game actually is. It always seems like Mitchell Trubisky handles them very effectively, efficiently, and it looks like Matthew Stafford, even when it's just Matthew Stafford, that he can't really do much. So I really have it hard. Like, I'm not even a huge fan of the Chicago Bears offense. I'm really not, but it just seems like they just have Matthew Patricia like in their hands every single game. And, Matthew Patricia, you look at him and his players don't really like him that much either. And when you have a coach that players are saying that they're not a huge fan of, that's not a very convincing sign. I think the Lions are kind of a flawed organization, and not that the Bears don't have some of their own flaws, but at least we don't have players that are really complaining about the coaching, the players on the team. So ultimately, I really have a hard time believing that this is going to be a close game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see how it plays out, and I think a lot of it has to hinge on, how the Bears start off, and I think, also the mentality that they take in wrapping up the game. I think just, with how I've seen the Bears play their first games of the season the past few years, even, in 2018 when they jumped out to that quick lead against Green Bay and looked like they had every right to put them out, they didn't end up scoring another point in the second half. So I guess kind of just, my my way I see the Bears finishing on week one. Maybe it's just my vision's a little tainted just because of what they've done in the past few performances and how they've played. It's just the Bears in general. They're not a great finishing team. We saw that a lot last year. They let teams linger around for too long, and hopefully we see the change of that. But it is week one, and I think that things could get sloppy. And I think the Bears they might not have the luxury of being able to pull out to a real quick lead and be able to sit on it.
And that's really the two options that occur here. Either you look at the way the Bears have played in previous week ones and also against like a lot of other teams, and the offense has struggled. Or you look at how the Bears specifically have played against Detroit, and the offense looks like they're, top 10 offense. So really it's going to be interesting to see which one of those ends up being the case. Are the Bears that's why even if the Bears do put up 27, 30, even 34, 35 points, I'm not going to be convinced that this offense is a great offense. I'm not going to be convinced that Mitchell Trubisky is a great quarterback. I'm truthfully just going to believe that this is kind of a because we're playing Detroit type of situation. And I'm sure my boy Don Burr, who comments on every single one of these, every single one of my videos that's a Detroit Lions fan, is going to come at me flaming. So Don, please comment in the video what you think about our takes here. I think you're subscribed to me, but I'm sure we'll get some hate from you. But yeah, I'm sorry, bro. I think that the Lions are unfortunately probably going to lose this game. But I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility that they end up beating us. And if they do, when I come on this pod on, I don't know when we're going to do the next pod. We're still trying to figure out our schedule for the season. But when I come on the next pod, I'm going to be just completely just like devastated and lethargic. I'll probably be sick for a week.
Yeah, well, if they end up losing to the Lions this week one and they don't look good, I mean, it's gonna be tough, and it looks like they might be in for a long season. Of course, that's not the case. It's only week one. It's the same way that a win will feel great. You don't want to get ahead of yourself too much. It is week one. There's a lot of Super Bowl teams that have lost week one. It's not a mandatory win at all, but it'd be a good start in a game that they should win. Like you said, Detroit, kind of the bottom dweller in the division, trying to throw some respect onto before saying you guys have been good in the somewhat recent past. But yeah, I mean, it's usually same old Detroit, and you want to be able to at least get your 2 wins against them.
Hey guys, like our video, subscribe, and check out our bi-weekly podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Thanks.